Good morning. I'm so excited. I'm sure you can see how my smile is beaming. I'm so excited about what I'm about to talk about because it's something that keeps coming back at me. I studied this passage some years back, and every now and then I go back and I go back. But yesterday afternoon, I had this thing. It just like hit me. Okay, just share about it. And I want to tell you that when I was praying before I did this recording, I want you to know that I prayed that the Lord will set the captives free. I prayed that the Lord would deliver someone. I pray that someone, somewhere, who has been destabilized by words of people who seek to undermine, who seek to belittle, will be set free. I pray that someone who has begun to doubt themselves, who has begun to withdraw, to become reserved, to wonder if they should go ahead and carry out the mission that's on their heart or not. I want the Lord to set you free this morning with this word. I think it's a powerful word, and that every human being, I think, goes through these things that I'm going to talk about. And I'm praying for you specifically this morning who's going to take time to listen. I pray you be free. I pray the Lord looses you, loose that woman, loose that man, and let him go. I pray that this word will speak to the core of your being, to the depths of your spirit, and cause you to arise, because what I'm talking about is very, very important. So yesterday I made a post about how people who always want to be the ones to say to others, stay in your lane, most times they're the ones who are not in their lane, because a continuous utterance of that statement is a show of insecurity and perhaps fear of competition. And I found them out. There are so many of them in the Word of God, and we live with some of them. Some of them are brothers, some of them are parents, some of them are our pastors, our leaders mostly. Many times these statements come from leaders who are trying to block others from what they think is their area of function. So they're trying to protect their territory. And so they utter these statements, sometimes even from the pulpit, to scare people off. And sometimes they even use the name of the Lord when the Lord hasn't spoken, when it's their fear on their tongue, when it's their fear screaming out loud, their insecurity screaming out loud. And they say that as if the Lord is talking when the Lord is not talking. I want you to learn in 2024 to differentiate between God's voice and man's voice. Because sometimes God is talking and man puts his voice there, puts his opinion, decides that they are going to qualify what they're saying by putting their opinion, which is not in line with what God is saying, particularly insecure leaders. For some reason, the Lord is kind of like aligned my life, this particular time of my life, to talking about leadership a lot. Leadership is key to the growth of people, to the thriving of the people that are under them. So, yeah, so let me say this. That statement I spoke yesterday, I was taking it from David's life, David's encounter with his big brother Eliab. In First Samuel chapter 17. So I'm going to read from verse 23, First Samuel chapter 17, verse 23. David had been sent by his father to take food for his brothers. Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah were enlisted in Saul's army, so they lived in the barracks, so to speak. And so Jesse sent David with food supplies to go and give them, but also check how they were doing. And right there and then I get very excited because I see a situation where David was sent by an earthly father to the battlefront or to the barracks to go and give his brothers food. But in the same vein, God was sending David to go and tackle Goliath. Very, very important aspect. Sometimes we are sent, like Saul, sent to go and look for donkeys. And there and then in the same journey, same mission, he meets Samuel, the seer, who tells him God is calling you to be a king. So you need to pay attention. Sometimes you're sent for one particular thing, and God has another. Pay attention. Pay attention. There's always something beyond the physical to the things that we are asked to do. There's always a spiritual aspect, and you have to see it so that you don't miss it, because that will be your graduation. That's actually what God would want you to digress and do, because this mission that David had been sent for by his father was physical, but God was sending him for a spiritual assignment, which would also change his physical life, because when you become a king, so it changes everything for him, and you must pay attention not to miss what God is doing at the same time as he is taking food for his brothers. Discernment is important, and staying ready is also important under the circumstances. So verse 23 says that this is David as he was talking with his brothers. The Bible says as he was talking with them, he saw Goliath, the champion from Gath, come out from the Philistine ranks, shouting his challenge to the army of Israel. As soon as the Israelite army saw him, they began to run away in fright. And this is playing before David. Have you seen the giant? The men were asking. He comes out each day to challenge Israel. And have you heard about the huge reward the king has offered to anyone who kills him? The king will give him one of his daughters for a wife, and his whole family will be exempted from paying taxes. This is such a huge reward. And David talked to some others standing there to verify the report, because it's always important to get a witness. These are all principles. Don't run off one person's word. Always get a witness, particularly if it's a big mission. What will a man get for killing this Philistine and putting an end to his abuse of Israel? He asked them. Who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God? I want to stop here before I go further and say David made an accurate diagnosis of who Goliath was. To the rest of the army, he was a giant. He was an insurmountable mountain. He was a giant that made them scary for dear life. The Bible says that he came every morning and evening to taunt the Israelites, which means during the day, the Israelites are arrested by fear from what Goliath said in the morning. That's the first dose. And then he comes with the second dose in the evening, and he scares them off again. He terrifies them. And so they go to bed still fearing Goliath. So they were feeding on fear 2 times a day for 40 days, which is 80 times. They were being fed fear, which means their lives were just arrested by fear of this one man. The whole army fearing one man. That's what happens when you open yourself up to let the enemy speak to you, because he's going to magnify something that's so small, and before you know it, it's something that you can't deal with. So now, one of the major things that I teach people is don't listen to your enemy. Don't give him your ears. Don't even give him any meditation of yours, because he will soon arrest your mind. What started out as a small thing will become a major thing that will be almost impossible for you to tackle. And so this is where these guys were brought. But now the difference with David, the difference between David and those guys is that David comes at this particular moment when Goliath comes to show off as he does every single day. And for David, it's the first time he's hearing this guy. And I want to say this even as I go here a little. The very moment the enemy speaks to you is the time that you should speak back and make a decision to shut him up. The very moment he opens his mouth to defy you, the army of the Lord, the very moment he opens up his mouth to say anything negative that's against God's word against you, you must open your mouth and stop him. You must actually take action, immediate action. Don't let it fester. Don't let it ferment. Don't let it stay in your soul, because it's going to arrest you. So you speak back right there and come up with a course of action right there and there before he gets into your system. That's what David did. And that's how he actually managed to conquer this guy in a short space of time and without much effort. It's because of the decision he made right from the beginning. This guy shouldn't speak. Already he diagnosed him. He's a pagan Philistine. What does a pagan Philistine mean? It means this guy doesn't worship Jehovah, which means Jehovah is against him. And if Jehovah is against him, if the Bible says, if God be for me, who can be against me? Now, if God be against you, who can be for you? I say. So if God is against Goliath, David knows nothing can rescue Goliath. He will take him on and he will finish him off within a short space of time. He won't take much effort because God is against Goliath. And I'm going to expand a little further on this. So now he says, who is this guy who is allowed to defy the armies of a living God? Which means Goliath's God was not living. He was a dead one. Now ours is a living God. So who is this Goliath who is allowed to defy the armies of the living God, who conquers anything? And David received the same reply as before. What you have been hearing is true. That is the reward for killing the giant. Verse 28. But when David's oldest brother Eliab heard David talking to the men, he was angry. What are you doing around here anyway? He demanded. What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? I know about your pride and dishonesty. You just want to see the battle. And David replies in verse 29, what have I done now? David replied, I was only asking a question. And verse 30, he walked over to some others and asked them the same thing and received the same answer. David still wants confirmation. Before you take action, get confirmation, get a witness. Before you make a decision, get a witness. Now, I want to go back to what Eliab said, because this is what I want God to set you free from. We all face this one way or the other. Our oldest brother, our leader, our mentor, people in authority over us, somewhere down the road of life, we always must contend with this. The enemy uses it to cloak potential, to sabotage, to block your movement, to block your growth. And now, Eliab says to David, what are you doing around here anyway? Remember, I said Jesse had sent David with food. David could have left the food at the barracks, but he went to the battlefront. And as he is going to the battlefront, it's no longer Jesse's mission. That must be cleared. The moment David decides to leave the food with the keepers at the barracks and he marches to the battlefront, that is no longer Jesse's mission. He has stepped into another realm. And it's a realm that Eliab doesn't understand. It's a realm that Abinadab would not understand. It's a realm that Shammah would not understand. It's a realm that Saul himself as the king would not understand, because David has stepped onto God's mission. It has changed. The direction of his life is already changing. The direction of his function has already changed the moment he decided to head to the battlefront, because there he is going to hear things that are necessary for him to step onto his next level. There he's going to hear things that will activate the warrior in him that had been trained in the bush, behind the scenes. Oh, I love God, because he trained some of us behind the scenes. In the morning, I was looking at some of the scars that I have on my body, and I was saying these are all scars that I have gotten behind the scenes, and nobody sees them. What you see is the fruit from the scars. Is the fruit from what God put to work together. But you don't see the scars and you don't see the pain. And David has things that his brothers do not understand. He is holding on to testimonies that Eliab does not understand, that may even become unbelievable to Eliab, because David's testimonies are out of this world. They are not for an ordinary person. They are not for an ordinary individual. They are for a person who walks with God. And so he says, what are you doing around here anyway? Which means David shouldn't be there. He's not permitted. He doesn't belong there. Have you been asked such kind of a question? It may not be in the exact words, but if somebody asked you why you are doing it a certain place, because they imply that you don't belong. But in your heart, deep down your heart, you know you belong because there's something that God has done in the secret place in your life. And you know you have a witness in your soul that you should be at the battlefront. You should go and see what's going on, because something that God has created inside of you, behind the scenes, has got to come out and be manifest during that period. Have you ever felt like that? Are you feeling like that right now? And if you are, I want to tell you, don't retreat because of Eliab's voice, because of Eliab's question. Eliab doesn't understand you. He doesn't know you, because nobody knows you more than God, who knows the work he's been doing in your life behind the scenes. Nobody else knows. And I want you to hold on to that testimony. And so he asks him what he was doing there, because to Eliab, David didn't belong. And he says, and the Bible actually says he demanded, which means he really was authoritative and he wanted an answer from David. Uh, and this is among people, you know, and sometimes I get very I'm particular about how people attend to others in the public. I'm always thinking, okay, please don't embarrass someone. Don't do that. Don't squeeze that person's life in front of other people, because sometimes when you are questioned in the public, you have people who respect you who may start to disrespect you, to disregard you because of how you were spoken to in public. And so I'm very particular about how people speak to me in public and how I address people in public, or how leaders address people in the public. I'm very particular about that, because it can actually become a turning point for someone in the negative. You can take away from them. That's why I get upset that Laban would challenge Jacob in front of his wives, because he can cause his wife to disrespect him and his children to disrespect him for how he spoke to him and what he said in front of people, in front of his children. And so I don't. And so this is Eliab talking to David in front of people, and it has potential to cause David to shrink and to withdraw and to withhold himself and tuck his tail between his legs and walk back home and step out of God's zone. Step out of God's zone. And you don't want to cause someone to step out of God's zone, because God is coming for you. And I want you to know that you shouldn't let anybody cause you to step out of God's zone, because you're also responsible for where God is taking you. Now, the Bible says Eliab was angry. Why is Eliab angry? Because I don't understand. Why are you angry that David is there unless you don't think anything of your little brother? Obviously, he didn't, because listen to what he said next. What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? Those few sheep. That's a demeaning, undermining, underestimating statement. Your job is the few sheep, the little sheep, the few sheep that you look after. What about them now that you've come here? Your job is over there. So he had to tell David where he belongs, because to Eliab, David didn't belong there. This is exactly stay in your lane. Oh, but I'm going to shock you today, because what I want you to know right now, before I even describe it, is the one who was not in his lane was Eliab, not David. Just because Eliab has been enlisted by Saul and he's gone there ahead of David, doesn't mean that Eliab is in his lane and David is not in his lane, because David is ordained by God for this particular subject, for this situation, for this particular mission. So who is more belonging, the one who has been ordained by God for the thing, or the one who has been chosen by men? You answer that for yourself. What about those few sheep? That's where he thinks David belongs, because David started off as a shepherd. And just because you started off as a shepherd doesn't mean you end as a shepherd. Doesn't mean that's where you belong. Because when you look ahead again, and this is a subject I'm going to discuss, you will find that when David became a musician for Saul, Saul also wanted him to remain as a musician, because these are all insecure leaders. They want you to stop where they got to know you from. I know about your pride and dishonesty. You just want to see the battle. What pride did David have? I sat down and I thought about this when I was studying this a few weeks back. And I asked myself, is it pride because David was already also chosen as a king before them? They had been paraded before Samuel. And I don't want to say, okay, they were rejected. for the king's job. And David, this small boy, their last brother, the smallest in the family, the youngest in the family, was chosen over them. Was Eliab suffering from a jealous spirit towards his brother because he had been chosen over him? Because remember, he appeared first, and Samuel in his fleshly mind, he had said, oh, surely this is the king. Because he was tall, he was big, he was fitting for the king in the physical. But God, wasn't looking for someone who physically fits, but who runs when the time for test comes. When the time for him to act comes, he runs. God had already seen this. These are David's three brothers who appeared first before Samuel, who could have potentially been ordained for the king, but they're the same ones who run when Goliath appears. Should God anoint a leader who runs when trouble comes? No, he won't. And guess what? God anointed the right guy, because when trouble comes, David doesn't run. David trusts the name of the Lord, who caused him to conquer a bear, to club a lion to death. Lions and bears, actually, at some point, it's in plural, which means he had done it more than once, more than twice. And so God knows that David is not a runner. The only time David runs is when he misdiagnoses Saul. And so he takes off. But, it will come after somewhere where I'm packaging it. And so now Eliab says, I know about your pride and dishonesty. Sometimes people misconstrue your confidence in the Lord for pride. And I want you to be free today. If you know for sure that what they say is pride is just your confidence in the Lord, set them free and continue on walking in the confidence that you have in God. If indeed you are proud, you will have to repent. But from what I see, what Eliab calls pride in David is David's confidence in God. It's David's confidence in God that is causing him to ask more and more about this mission, so that he can prepare his spirit, he can prepare his soul, he can prepare himself mentally to take on this giant. And Eliab looks at it as pride. He also says dishonesty. He says it's dishonesty because he thinks David is just there because he wants to watch the battle. But I want to say something to you. Was there a battle to watch? Or he was there to watch the army of Israel running away from Goliath? You can imagine if David had said, Eliab, there's no battle to watch here. You've been running yourself. All of you have been running. So are you trying to say that this is a battle where one person appears and all of you run? And Eliab would have felt offended. But sometimes there are leaders who actually will accuse you of dishonesty and pride when they themselves are on the run. They're running from the mission. They're not applying themselves intelligently. And when you come in and you apply yourself diligently, and you apply yourself intelligently, and you apply yourself with all your heart, with the aggression that is needed, with the passion and the zeal that is needed, they call you dishonest and they call you arrogant. But I want you not to buy into it. So long as your heart is pure before the Lord, don't buy. So long as you're in the God zone, don't buy into what they're saying, because they're trying to stop you. They're trying to discredit you. They're trying to demean you, to cause you to shrink by hurting you, which is what Eliab was doing to David. And I love what David did. The Bible continues in verse 29 to say that David actually moved on and went on to ask the next group of people. What does that mean? David remained focused on the mission. He was so convicted, so convinced he needed to take action that he moved on from his brother. He didn't pay attention to him. And I'm asking you, don't pay attention to naysayers. Don't pay attention to those that seek to stop you from graduating into your next level. Don't listen. Jesus himself didn't listen. They tried to say he's casting demons with Beelzebub. They actually tried to stone him for having said he can destroy that temple and build it in 3 days. They tried to say you can't do that by threatening him, by accusing him. When he had said the right things, they were accusing him falsely, but he would have said the right thing. It became false accusation because in their minds, he cannot perform this. He cannot forgive sin. And so when Jesus is forgiving sin, they're busy saying, who are you? Because they don't understand it. And so this is where many times our lives are sidetracked. and derailed by people who don't understand us, by people who misconstrue our confidence, who misconstrue your passion, your hunger, your thirst to fulfill your dreams, to answer God's call for pride and dishonesty. And so Eliab is accusing David, you just came to watch the battle. But David didn't come to watch the battle. He came to save even Eliab's life. So sometimes even the people who insult you and criticize you and demean you and say negative words are the same people that your gift is going to save. They're the same people whom, when you answer your call, their lives are going to be preserved. So don't pay attention to them. Do like Jesus. Be like, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. Because Jesus knew he was forgiving their sins. He was dying for them, even though they were killing him and they were insulting him and they were spitting on him. And so Eliab is spitting on David. David was going to save his life, because as soon as David kills Goliath, the army of Israel is free. And so David continues on, which is what I'm urging you to do. Continue on the right path, regardless of what your elder brother says. Continue on the right path, regardless of what your leader, your insecure leader says. Continue on the right path, regardless of what your ignorant friends, cousins, sometimes even parents say. Continue on in the right direction, because you understand what is in you. You know what is calling you. You know what has happened. You know the training you've received in the private. You know, nobody, you can't explain it to anybody because they will not understand. You know the extent to which God has prepared you. So go ahead and march. Go ahead and inquire about Goliath. Go ahead and inquire about your reward. Go ahead and inquire so that you have full information to take on this battle and take it on. And I want to say to you, at the end of the day, when this mission was over, if Eliab sits down under a tree shade and meditates on it, he's going to realize he's the one who was in the wrong lane, because he ran. And the one in the right lane is the one whom he was trying to say, stay in your lane, the few sheep, go and be a shepherd. If Eliab is true to himself, he will go to David and say, my brother, I underestimated you. My brother, I was wrong about you. And several chapters ahead, Eliab ended up enlisting into David's army. So you can imagine the same person who was saying, go to the few sheep, now submits to David and he joins the army of David. Do you see how it has turned around? Do you see how when you insist on doing the right thing, even the people who try to stop you will come and submit to you? Because you've taken up your call, you've taken up your position. And so I want to say to you, is it Eliab's lane or is it David's lane? Who is in the wrong lane? Or are they all in the right lane to different degrees and Eliab didn't understand? They can all be in the army, but David must be allowed to serve according to his capacity. Serve according to your capacity. Make room for yourself to serve according to your capacity, which is what David did. Make room for yourself. If Eliab is not making room for you, make room for yourself. Insist on doing what God has sent you there to do. It's more than the basket of food you brought. It's more than the report that your father wants to hear about your brother's welfare. You are in the God zone and you must insist on being allowed to fight this battle, because it's going to change your life and the lives of the people attached to you, including the naysayers and the ones that wanted to stop you. So here I am saying to you, if God has told you it's your lane, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. If God has trained you for the lane, just because they didn't see you, you didn't do assault courses with them, just because you were not jumping and marching with them, doesn't mean you're not qualified. They don't understand that your training was even more dangerous, because you were being trained with bears, something that could have torn your life into pieces at once. The problems you've had to handle are too big for them. They would not have managed. Are you listening to me? The problems you've had to handle and overcome are too big for them. If they're running from Goliath, they surely would have run from the bear. In fact, the bear was going to catch them, because they were going to trip and fall because of fear, and it was going to catch them and kill them. If the lion had appeared before them, they would have shuddered with fear. They would have trembled and probably peed in their pants, and the lion would have found them standing there and killed them very easily. They don't understand The things you've had to conquer in the private are more dangerous than what they are facing. But you do understand, so don't be deterred. Don't be deterred. Don't be stopped by people who don't know you, who don't know your private affairs with God. Don't be stopped by people who don't understand the things you've had to conquer, and that what they think is a giant to you is just a pagan, it's just an uncircumcised Philistine whom you're going to kill with a stone. It's one smooth stone, because the power you rely on is the power that is in the name of the Lord, who helped you to kill the bears and the lions. And so I hope this encourages you. It's the beginning of the year. Pick up this attitude. If you are in your lane, don't let anybody convince you otherwise. Pick up this attitude. The one trying to say you're not in your lane is the one who might not be in their lane. And before you know it, they may soon start following you. The Lord bless you, and I pray that you win. I pray that you identify your Goliath and you kill them without compromise. And Eliab will be glad you are his brother. The Lord bless you.